Welcome to this week, October the 18th show. Welcome and thank you if you have subscribed to our YouTube channel or our Getter channel. We have actually made it over 100 on Getter, and we're knocking on 1,400 on YouTube. X, we've got 6,800, Facebook 6,700. We're moving up, and that's thanks to each one of you. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for taking the time to go subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. It's really as simple as just clicking a button. If you're on Getter right now, we've got several thousand people that will join us over the course of the show today. We had over 6,000 people just on Getter last Saturday. We love it when people come there and interact. It's really fun to have you. It's on the John Fredericks page, but if you'd like to, we're going to start streaming on John Gordon Truth. Hopefully by, I don't know, this week, Anthony, are we on there? Or next week, it sounds like. Okay, let's get to it. We've got a good show today. No, we have a horrible show. It sucks. You really shouldn't listen. You should change the channel right now. I've been waiting for somebody to say that for a long time. They just never do. But I think we do have a good show today. We're going to talk about Charlie Kirk's death. And Dan Bongino held a press conference and made some interesting comments. Governor Pritzker, evidently he doesn't know when to quit when he's down. And the guy's just a buffoon. We're going to talk about the Governor Buffoon Pritzker. And then Letitia James, she's doubling down on her idiocy. So we're going to talk about those things right now. But later in the show, we've got Bruce Torres. He is the Director of Communications for the American Small Business League. And we're going to be talking to him about the government shutdown and the effect it is having on small businesses. Then we've got a really good interview coming up with James Bradley. He is an author of a book called Precious Freedom. It's a novel, but I guess you call it a historical novel. He spent 10 years living in Vietnam, researching it to write this historical novel. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm still grieving the loss of Charlie. And one of my disappointments is that Candace seemed to have been all over it. And now she's just like gone radio silent. And she's changed her focus to talking about the Jews, and they're branding her an anti-Semite. And she's venting on her podcast about that. But I was really digging it when she was on the trail of who killed Charlie Kirk. And I don't know whether she's lost interest or whether somebody got to her, or whether maybe somebody in our government called her up and said, Candace, let us handle this. You're killing us here. We're on it. We're going to solve it. I don't know. That's just rank speculation. I have no insight. But every day for 3 weeks, she was putting out videos and identifying the things that didn't make sense. I was captivated by it. I thought maybe we might really have an independent journalist that would get to the truth. But I'm sure as heck not satisfied. Once again, we have another lone gunman theory, but this time it's proving not to be a lone gunman. And the people that have analyzed the shot consistently conclude that Tyler Robinson, if that was him on the roof, could not have made that shot from 200 yards away. And then the questions about the gun: how did he break it down? How did he put it back together? Why did he leave it in a blanket in the woods? None of it makes any sense. And I don't know who killed Charlie. I don't. I started to say the other week, and I never finished my thought, that I think Charlie may have something to have done having done with bringing an end to the war in the Middle East. But first, let's look at this clip that Charlie made on his own, the comments that he made on his own podcast just before he died.
And Jewish donors, they have a lot of explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do, because Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened? And it's not just the colleges. It's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. It's like time for you guys to wake up and say no more, draw a line in the sand. I don't care if you hate me.
So I don't really know what to make of that video. Would you let me know what you think? Put it in the comments on YouTube or email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. I really enjoy hearing from you. Please let me hear from you. But let me know what you make of that video from Charlie. I don't know whether he was talking about himself or others or just from a 30,000 foot view. But what we do know is that Charlie, Tucker, Candace, to some extent Megan, had been talking about and distancing themselves just a little bit from Israel. They were concerned about genocide in Gaza. And I'm so conflicted on this, folks. I really am. You know, I don't pick sides. I really, the only side I want to be on is truth. And what we know is that Jews in this country have 2% of the population, maybe less, and they control 25 to 30% of the real wealth, the billionaire class, and they control 85% of the media. And you can't tell them that they've had a bad hair day without them becoming apoplectic. And Charlie and Tucker were starting to not distance themselves from Israel, but just question the legitimacy of the war in Gaza and the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been taken on both sides. But I can't figure out who the white hats are. And, you know, we're spoon-fed information. And particularly, you have to look at it from the standpoint that this 85% number of Jews that control the media in America, that is significant power. And so what we know is that that Hamas, the, I guess, loosely governing body of Palestinians, killed hundreds of people at a pop festival on October the 7th, 2023. I've read as many as 2,000 people, perhaps. And that they captured 251 hostages and held them for 2 years and killed a lot of them. Now, you know that, right? Do you also know that Israel held 2,000 Palestinians? I think they called them prisoners or captives. I think you could just as easily name them hostages. And they complained of mistreatment, beatings, sexual violations, problems with nourishment. But you don't hear about that. You only hear about the people from Israel that were taken hostage and mistreated. So you tell me, who are the white hats? I'm honest. I cannot sort it out. We're told that we have to support Israel because they are one of our closest allies. Okay, I'll support all of our allies, any of them. But I'm not going to condone atrocities. I'm not going to condone wiping out and committing genocide. And that's what Tucker was complaining about. That's what Charlie was worried about. And Charlie was really mad because they pressured him. They pressured him not to have Tucker at a Turning Point event. They pressured him to be more careful about the things that he was saying. And they took away funding from Charlie. So did Mossad have a role in killing Charlie Kirk? I don't know. All I know is it's another lone gunman theory a single shot fired from a gun that we're told was broken down, removed from the roof. Tyler Robinson did it. He reassembled it and put it in the woods. And every expert that I can find on YouTube, not one person has said that they could make that shot or they think he could have made that shot. Everybody does. No one thinks that he could have broken down that gun with a screwdriver. You'd have to have a special tool that you couldn't break it down in less than 5 or 10 minutes, and you couldn't put it back together in less than 5 or 10 minutes. None of it makes any sense. So what do you do when people start lying to you or telling you things that don't make sense? You start to question everything, and that's where I am right now. I don't know. Dan Bongino won on Newsmax with Rod Schmidt. Here's what he had to say.
This is not the end of this investigation. It's not even the end of the beginning of the investigation. We've just started. The fact that we have a suspect, and everybody's obviously innocent until proven guilty in this constitutional republic we have, but we are investigating a potential broader network of people who may have known. And we've had some, I think I can tell you comfortably on your show tonight, we've had some developments in the case actually right before I came on the air. So there have been some significant developments in the case. You'll be the first to hear about it. And we hope to have more on that. Have to be careful about it right now. But we hope to have more on that within the coming hours.
You mean developments as far as other potential people involved, or can you give me a hint?
I'll say the involvement of others in the case, yes, that's an accurate assessment. I just have to obviously be careful.
Well, that sounds promising. And I like Bongino. I think he's a straight shooter. You know, I don't know why people, when they get in government, start talking like G-men. He has certainly adopted a lot of the vernacular. Maybe that's just, you know, people who go to Italy will speak Italian. Maybe it's no more complicated than that. But everything seems to be couched in code and secrecy. And I'm sure 85% for totally legitimate purposes. My sense is that's where Bongino is. Yet they told us that they got their guy and he was acting alone. Now, because of YouTube and this text message app called Discord, which is a social platform, I guess you can go on to Discord and you can create a room for like-minded people or your friends or your relatives, and you can sit in there and chat supposedly in private with one another. Do you know there were two or three messages the day before Charlie that was assassinated? One that said, something big's going to go down tomorrow. You'll know it when you see it. And there were a couple of other chats like that indicated that Charlie might be assassinated, or either implied that or said it. Scary stuff. And we want answers. And I want to know, you want to know, we deserve to know. I just wish they would stop the cover-ups and just for once shoot straight with us. Just tell it like it is. All right, so you know what's going on in Chicago right now. Trump has deployed the National Guard because he's sick of watching the murder and the mayhem on television week after week after week after week. It's gone on for years now. Pritzker and the mayor won't do anything about it. And now they say that, it's a power grab. Trump's just coming into Chicago so he can take control. What an utter, complete crock. This guy, I think, is seriously demented. He's got more money than God. His family does. They're the heirs to the Hyatt chain. They're extremely wealthy. But you look at this guy, I mean, his thought process is just bizarre. And they don't mind lying to you. They don't mind telling you things that they know that are not true. But you know, Pritzker ordered his own state police to stand down, not to help ICE. And I don't know that he didn't tell them not to protect them. I'm not sure about that, but I think he just said we're completely hands off. Here's what we witnessed on the news just the night before last.
Oh, and there we go. We see police rushing forward to grab some folks. Rushing forward, pushing folks to the ground. People collapsing on the ground. These people are forced back as they execute an arrest. Arresting someone from the crowd. More police extend their line here onto the grass in front of some, looks like an apartment building.
ISP, IOF, KKK, they're on the stage! Disperse now, or you will be arrested!
Wow. Troubling scenes, hard to watch, but my God. Well, for starters, the state police have just completely ignored their own governor, who told them to stand down, and they said, I'll be damned. They have gone into combat, and they're protecting ICE, and they are assisting ICE, according to what I've learned. And so they're just flicking off Pritzker, and that does not disappoint me. I don't have a problem with that. Here's what one Illinois police officer had to say about it.
Trump is looking to cause mayhem and lay the foundation for actions far more craven. We cannot accept any of this as normal, and we cannot remain silent. We must continue to call this what it is, a dangerous power grab that echoes the rise of authoritarianism and authoritarian regimes throughout world history.
For a second there, you thought he woke up and he was actually talking about this illegal alien from Montenegro who was sworn in as a police officer. But no, he's talking about President Donald Trump, Greg.
Sandra, at this point, I think J.B. Pritzker has more in common with drug cartels, terrorist drug cartels, than he does with American citizens.
So what? That's a police officer reflecting on what you saw and heard, if you're on the radio, Pritzker saying about Trump's coming into Illinois. Well, Trump is the chief law enforcement officer of the country. I think it would be dereliction of duty, and he would not be upholding his oath of office if he turned a blind eye and buried his head in the sand and left it to the Illinois people to protect the Illinois people, which they evidently refused to do. So I think President Trump was within not only his right to intervene, but his duty to do so. And I think what we're going to find in another 2 or 3 weeks, the murder rate has dropped precipitously, that violent crime has dropped, and that a lot of bad people have been rounded up, including illegal aliens, especially those that have committed crimes. And I'll just tell you this, that, I watched a video yesterday of ICE arresting a guy. And, they're not nice about it. They're not like, sir, could you come over here? Would you please put your hands behind your back? We're going to arrest you. They just go in and tackle the suspect, handcuff him, and drag him off. And there's nothing polite about it. But I think, that's kind of the hand they've been dealt. You show somebody politeness, and the next thing you know, they pull a gun or a knife on you. So I think they have to resort to those tactics in order for their own protection. I would think that maybe there was a way that they could do it that wasn't so physical and demeaning, because in this case, they wrestled a United States citizen to the ground. They profiled him. They thought he was an illegal. They wrestled him to the ground, handcuffed him, put him in the back of a Suburban, were driving him somewhere, and he was able to convince them by his driver's license and other evidence that he had on his person that he was a lawful U.S. citizen and had committed no crimes. There were no wants, no warrants, and they lacked probable cause for the arrest. So that could be a lawsuit. I don't know. But I'm just saying this whole thing, it's messy. And they're going to make mistakes. And they've got a near impossible job that they've been asked to do. But I celebrate it. I support it. I encourage it. There's a lot about it that I don't like, but I think you got to take the bad with the good. And it's just the nature of the beast and the hand that President Trump has been dealt, because Joe Biden allowed 10 to 12 or 14 million illegals into this country. And why did he do it? Well, you know, I as you've heard me say frequently, I try and put things on a continuum and analyze what the possible points are along that continuum. So in the most favorable case for Joe Biden, I think what we know is that they've let these people into the country thinking that they would create a new class of Democratic voters and that would somehow allow them to remain in power. Well, it backfired in epic proportion because the American people saw through it and didn't buy it for a second. Now, at the far end of the spectrum, of the continuum, I am open to the possibility that Joe Biden committed treason by intentionally violating the laws of the United States in the same context of China paying Hunter $3.5 million and 10% for the big guy. I think it was more than 10% for the big guy. And we heard Hunter Biden on the phone, tape recorded, that got lots of play, shaking down someone in China to make a payment by midnight, or else his father, who was sitting right there, was not going to be happy. Then allowing all the fentanyl that came with it, all the military age fit Chinese men that also barreled across the border, and God only knows who else. What terrorists are living inside our borders right now because of Joe Biden. It almost feels to me that there is a possibility that could be an intentional act that is against our country's interest, and that maybe he was either paid or blackmailed to go along with it, because we know that he tracked a satellite all the way across the Atlantic, watched it go into Canada, and then dip down in the United States and linger over our most sensitive military bases for hours, tracked it into the Atlantic, and then shot it down when the mission was complete. I mean, how big an idiot do you have to be to realize that was, I think, an intentional decision not to shoot down that spy balloon? And you have to ask yourself why. So is that the basis for investigating him for treason? I really believe so. I think Joe Biden did worse than let people across our border to vote. I think that there is a possibility that he was intentionally, or someone in his administration who had control of the auto pen and the telephone and whatever else the president would use. I don't think a lot of it wasn't Biden. The fact of the matter is, we just don't know who it was. Was it Dr. Jill? Was it Hunter? Was it the chief of staff? Maybe it was a committee of all of those people. But they did more disservice to this country in 4 years than the Chinese or the Russians combined. And I just don't know why we're willing to let them off the hook. Being a former president of the United States, an illegitimate one at that took money, was corrupt, and committed what I consider to be treasonous acts, and pardoning people at the 11th hour by using the auto pen. Those pardons are not worth the paper they're written on. The president of the United States must pardon people. And there's a process by which to go about that. Then not only did they not follow the process, I don't think Biden even knew it. Now he's saying, I gave him the authority to. I don't buy it. I think it's a lie. Because they released murderers and rapists and robbers from prison, some of whom were on death row. I mean, I'm just telling you, you look at the facts and you look at the chaos, you have to ask yourself what was going on. And it very much feels to me that it was not as simple as trying to garner new votes. I'm telling you, I think there's evil at work in this country. And I think the murder of Charlie Kirk fits right in with the evil. Because you look what happened after Charlie's death. A lot of unintended consequences occurred, which were good things. And maybe that was not part of the calculus of the people that orchestrated this and pulled it off. But one of the things that also occurred is that it created further division within our borders from people that celebrated his death. No civilized human being with any kind of a conscience or a moral compass could celebrate the death of another person. I don't care who they are. Now, look, if they're Jack the Ripper or, Bonnie and Clyde, okay, fine. Charlie Kirk was a disciple of God. He preached God's word, and he was bringing tens of thousands of young people into the political system to be activists. A lot of people just didn't like the party that they were aligning with. But so they killed Charlie Kirk. No American should stand for that. And people that celebrated it, they should be identified and publicly ridiculed. I said that Charlie may have brought about peace in the Middle East. You think? I'm telling you, no sooner than he was assassinated did people start waking up and demanding peace. Coincidence or cause and effect? I don't know, but the sand shifted. This blind support, blind loyalty for Israel was shifting. Opinion leaders like Charlie Tucker, Candace, they were calling into question this war. Some people believe that Charlie was assassinated because of his change of position. I don't know. I'm not saying that was what happened, but it is a theory that should be either proven or disproven. It should be a theory that should be given serious consideration and a good look-see. And maybe it was the Democrats, the liberal leftists, that are the unhinged ones that think that political violence is acceptable. Maybe they should be looked at as possible conspirators. Maybe it was Mossad. Maybe they should be looked at. No chance. I mean, I've seen a lot of former CIA agents and people who study the intelligence community. And what I'm starting to learn is that the CIA almost operates independently of the United States government and the leadership. It's more aligned with what's British intelligence, MI6, and Mossad. They're really like an international intelligence agency, and that they work together. But then I've also learned that Mossad has got people planted inside our government at high levels that spy on us, and that we know that it happens. We don't know who they are, but so I don't know. It's a dang Rubik's Cube that I can't put all the pieces together, but I'm listening, I'm reading, I'm learning, I'm watching, and I'm trying my best to discern some truth out of it. Well, you don't have to look for truth when it comes to Letitia James. She just tells you right up front. She concocted this persecution of Donald Trump, saying that he overvalued his assets so that he could get more favorable loan treatment from banks. I've shared with you before, one of my first jobs was that I worked for a bank, and I took installment loan applications, and I reviewed those applications, and I did not make credit decisions, but I took my recommendation to my boss, and he would make the decision, but 9 out of 10 times he agreed with my recommendation. So I've got a little bit of insight into this, and I can tell you that we put very, very little significance in someone's financial statement. They're all inflated. People lie. They don't lie. They just puff a little bit. They say their $800,000 house is really worth $1.2 million, and that they really don't owe any money except, oh yeah, they forgot their American Express. They do have $20,000 on that. They forget to list. Things like that. But you rely on your own due diligence and independent information that you get from the credit reporting agencies. You verify the ownership of assets. You get independent appraisals. I mean, you can't borrow money on a house based on what you tell the bank it's worth. 100% of the time, they're going to order an appraisal. It's no different. You think that when Donald Trump's borrowing $1 billion or $400 million, that the bank is going to make their credit decision based on what Donald Trump said on his personal financial statement? Really, all it is a roadmap to go and tell you where to go look to value the assets that he's claiming. So Letitia James just made this up. And then that frickin' Judge Ingaramus, who used to be a drum teacher, he needs to go back to teaching drums, decided that he knew better than Trump and the banks what Mar-a-Lago was worth, and he valued it at $18 million. It was a sham. The whole thing was one big lie. But now, we find out that Letitia James claimed 2 of her properties as her principal residence. Well, folks, that's called tax fraud. Because as you know, if you homestead your house, and you're allowed to do that, you get significant savings on your ad valorem taxes. Well, so she claimed that her house in New York was her principal residence, and then she claimed that her house in Virginia was her personal residence. Fraud on its face. So it's her turn in the barrel now, and she doesn't like it. She's being treated so unfairly. Just listen to her own words.
And I will not bow. I will not break. I will not bend. I will not capitulate. I will not give in. I will not give up. You see, I've learned to stand on the shoulders of my ancestors who came before me and weathered the storm. And despite being seared with scars, they survived. And if they can survive, so will we. So over the last few days, I've summoned their strength and their courage. And I will keep fighting for justice. I will keep fighting for New Yorkers. I will keep fighting the aggressive policies of Washington, D.C., and I will not stop. I won't give up, and I won't give in. So we have no time to linger and focus on pettiness and revenge. We've got to press on, press forward, continue the journey, claim the victory.
Can you believe it? I mean, I watched that and my stomach just wants to hurl. I'm sorry. It's nauseating that someone could be that duplicitous and that hypocritical and that selfish. She tried to put Donald Trump in jail, and then she tried to take his assets. And now she's going to complain about being mistreated and that she's going to stand up to this tyranny? I mean, how does it work for her to be able to do it? But then when legitimately a grand jury indicts her for tax fraud, she has the audacity to complain and say that she's going to stand up to this. Well, I want her to chant that all the way into Rikers Island, and that's where she deserves. And I hope she ends up there, and it'd be okay with me if James Comey was her roommate. And Christopher Wray. Oh, there are no assets in the January 6th. Oh, well, maybe we may have had 26 contractors or agents in January 6th. No, Mr. Director, you had 256. That's called perjury. That's called lying to Congress. That's called obstruction. John Brennan, hey, I told you, I think Donald Trump is systematically and a piece at a time dismantling the deep state. And don't forget about John Bolton. They raided his house for good reason, because he was not the former president of the United States, did not have any immunity or any privilege to have classified documents, but evidently he had a big treasure trove of them in his house in Maryland. And by gosh, the FBI showed up on his doorstep, confiscated the classified documents, and guess what? He's now having his turn in the barrel. You know, that guy was so demeaning and so critical of Trump. And, you know, he was one of these Washington elitists who'd made their livelihood working in government for decades. And they think they know more than the other guys in the room. They're the smart ones. And they think they're above the law and they can do whatever they want to. And they can go on national television and criticize their boss and think he's going to look the other way and ignore it. But, you know, I'm tired of people saying that this is political retribution. I mean, you can say that. I mean, what is true is that Donald Trump's president, that the Justice Department is part of the executive branch, and it reports to the President of the United States, and that they have elected to look into allegations about these people. They've found the smoking guns, and they appear to be guilty of the crimes alleged, and grand juries are starting to indict them. They will go to trial, and then we're going to have a jury of 12 decide their guilt or innocence. But when they raided Mar-a-Lago, they went through Melania's lingerie and the drawers in her dressing room. Then they went through Barron's bedroom and his personal effects. I mean, these are really sleazy people acting way out of the bounds of authority. And there was a significant legal question about whether the documents that Trump had were classified or whether he had declassified them. He said he did. Well, the case went nowhere. Letitia James' case got reversed by the Supreme Court. Jack Smith, he's under the microscope. He did flagrantly he did flagrantly illegal acts in his prosecution of Donald Trump. He lied on warrants. He misrepresented, and now he's going to get his turn in the barrel. I'm telling you, folks, look, this is not about revenge or getting even. It is about accountability. You cannot serve in government, violate the oath that you took, violate the laws of our country, and expect that you get a free pass because you had a big fancy title and an appointment from some president. In Jack Smith's case, it was Joe Biden by way of Merrick Garland. So anyway, I'm enjoying it. Get the popcorn. Let's get it ready. Let's sit back and enjoy it. I'm not taking any delight in their having to face the same ordeals that President Trump did, other than the fact that I truly believe that they broke the law and they did so knowingly and intentionally. And you know what? They made one big fatal error. They had one big flaw in their calculus. They thought that they would defeat Donald Trump, and that they would either put him in Rikers, bankrupt him, or destroy him politically, and that he would never get elected. That was the furthest thing from their imagination. But they should have stopped and thought about the consequences of what if. What if we persecute this guy? What if we put him through the ringer and it's based on a pack of lies and false affidavits and a breach of their authority? What if he survives it? What if he dodges a bullet in Butler? What if he becomes president of the United States? Are you really that naive? Are you really that a fantasy that you think is just going to go away and nobody's going to look and nobody's going to care? Wrong. So let the sun shine in and let the chips fall where they may. President Trump did what no one thought he could do, and he has accomplished peace in the Middle East. He accomplished what everybody thought was the impossible, and he ushered in an historical peace accord on the heels of a negotiated ceasefire. Yet before the ink was dry, Hamas was in the town square shooting people in the back, blindfolded, who they deemed to be disloyal. How many times do we have to learn the same lesson over and over again? You cannot trust a terrorist. But here's the question. Can we trust Israel? You know, Hamas had 250 hostages. We just talked about it. Israel had 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Hamas has grown to 40,000 people. Do you know that's the size of Birmingham, Roanoke, Huntington? That is a large number of people. Part of me says, let's just get rid of them. But that's genocide. That's murder. That's a crime against humanity. It's not an option. But what can we do? Can we identify the bad actors? Can we identify the people that murdered, raped, and robbed and put them in jail? Hold trials? It's overwhelming because of the sheer numbers. There's savagery on both sides, it appears to me. So hopefully President Trump is right. He's got them in a position where they've all agreed to peace. Hamas has promised to de-arm. They haven't. We'll see where that goes. President Trump said, look, if you don't disarm, we'll disarm you. So I don't think the final chapter has been written yet, but we will continue to watch and bring you our analysis. And I'd like to know what you think. I mean, I'm clearly trying to sort all this out in my own mind, and I have not gotten there yet. Maybe you can help me. If you think you've got some insight, email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They are a restaurant services business in Atlanta, Georgia. They have hundreds of restaurants. They've been in business now approaching 15 or 20 years. You don't talk to any automated attendants when you call Perfect Circle. If you need emergency service, they've got it. They're there to offer it to you. They will clean your grease trap. They will pick up your waste vegetable oil. They will disinfect your front of the house and the back of the house. They give clean, reliable service. And all their drivers have passed FBI checks. So you don't have to worry about some sort of scoundrel showing up at your back door if you're the owner of a restaurant. They're law-abiding, clean driving records, and good employees. Most of them have been there for a long time. The average tenure at PCRE, I believe, is right at 7.5 or 8 years. And if you're tired of sloppy, inconsistent, rude service at your restaurant, consider giving Perfect Circle a look. That's PCRenergy.com. Check them out. We come to you every Saturday from noon to 2 and every Sunday from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network in 8 cities on 22 AM and FM radio stations. We also come to you on CDM.press. They're our friends who believe in the truth and they take our feed and rebroadcast it on their social media platforms, and as well as their 13 digital platforms. So cdm.press, thank you for your affiliation. We really appreciate it. And we're also all over the web. You can watch us on YouTube Live, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter.com right now. Just go hit the live button on any of those platforms. Please think about subscribing and liking us if you do. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and you can also follow us, and I wish you would, on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Getter, and Truth Social. And you can always email me at johngordontruth@gmail.com. And you can watch all of our past episodes on johngordon.tv. Please consider visiting us there. A great program coming up next. We're going to talk about the government shutdown and the Vietnam War. Stay tuned. Here's our first guest, Bruce de Torres. We're living in turbulent times. We continue to see atrocities that smack of the deep state all over them. Where am I coming from? Well, just think about God, school, 9/11, and JFK. The lies that are killing us and the truth that sets us free. Now that sounds like the title of an excellent book, and we're privileged to have Bruce de Torres, the author of that very book, with us today on The Truth. Bruce, welcome.
Thank you very much, John. It's great to meet you.
Former fellow Atlantean. I guess that's right. I guess we're Atlanteans. I'm not sure. People that used to live in Atlanta. All right, Bruce, so we are in turbulent times. We've got a peace deal that is seemingly hanging by the thread in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians and Hamas. We've got a federal government with I believe, $5 trillion a year budget that is shuttered. They just turned out the lights and closed the doors. And then we saw the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk on September the 10th. And it still shocks me to my core. And I have resisted, consciously, intentionally resisted allowing my mind to consider yet another conspiracy that would lead us back to our own intelligence. Yet, the more I dig, the more I look, the more I probe, the more I am becoming open to the possibility that this was a political assassination organized by people within our government. What do you think?
At this point, I would bet that that is so. That's what I think about that.
And we know I'm going to Dallas in just, 3 weeks, Anthony, I think, for the, what anniversary is it of JFK's assassination?
62.
62nd anniversary of JFK's assassination. And there are 3 conferences there memorializing the assassination, and people that are really in the know, like Oliver Stone and Roger Stone, and probably, I think, Mark Lane, people that have made a lifetime of studying the JFK assassination. There is no doubt in my mind any longer that our own government killed the 35th president of the United States. And it is disturbing and it is shocking. How in the hell do these people get away with it? Where is the accountability? And more importantly, how do we stop it?
It'd be great to stop it. My bottom line often is to remember that it has ever been thus. There's something about human nature that lets those who want power over others to either go crazy, or it attracts the insane. It attracts those who at some level are comfortable with the wheeling and dealing of having the levers of control. The way to stop it is to educate ourselves and educate each other and have the courage to have conversations like this, to question authority in a nutshell. And then it's so humbling, John, to try to advise anybody. What do you do when you see that the people who have been pretending to protect us and work for us are hurting us, harming us, restricting us, sickening us, scaring us, exploiting us, and killing us, all with a smile on their face? And I'm at the point, after really a lifetime of reading history, of prioritizing my day-to-day, literally moment by moment, calm, peace, cheerfulness, and knowing that if I'm scared, I'm useless to myself, I'm useless to anybody else. I can be reactionary and I can make dumb decisions. So once someone looks at the type of events you've described and the kind of reality of what we're up against, then we can, gingerly just, maybe the 80-20 rule, 80% of it is just getting convinced, accepting it, telling ourselves we can handle the truth, and then seeking other people like you and I to have conversations with, because if we don't corroborate our impression of reality with others, we can go insane and succumb to alcoholism and drug addiction or video games and just cynicism and nihilism and then we're really on the path to self-destruction. So what's at balance is our own personal, grip and functioning, and then have conversations to come back to where we started with the question, how do we stop them? All of the above, or spreading the word one person at a time? That's real broad strokes. I can get a lot more specific, but that's from the heart.
Well, conservatively, 100 people who had personal knowledge of JFK's assassination died under very mysterious circumstances. There was a epidemic of automobile accidents that caused the death to the driver. Then there was a pedestrian that had firsthand knowledge of the assassination because she knew Jack Ruby, she knew Lee Harvey Oswald, and she had met him at Jack Ruby's club. And she had overheard talk about the assassination. She tried to warn the authorities. I can't remember her name right off the top of my head.
Sheremy Rose, something like that.
I think you're right at it.
Rose Sheremy, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And she ended up being run over basically on a Texas highway in the middle of the night. It was very bizarre. But so these people will kill to maintain their power and to avoid accountability. Clearly. Then, but with JFK's assassination, the more you dig into it, the more I have become convinced, and I think people that have made a lifetime of studying this are convinced, that it was basically, there were multiple reasons for it, and a lot of people were mad at him. But I think the principal one is that he said, I'm going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and spread its parts from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And 6 months later, he was dead. I put that at the top of my list of motivations for someone to kill Kennedy. Sorry, the dogs are not happy. Anyway, but you, on some level, you do not accept it under any circumstances, but you understand it. It could be survival if you were in that position, if you worked in the CIA and, they rationalize that they're doing the work on the behest of the American people and to save democracy. I think they're doing their work, and the bad actors are doing their work to aggrandize themselves and their egos, including killing people. But what I cannot contemplate, I cannot find a motivation for taking down Building 7 in September the 11th. what possible motivation could the deep state, the CIA, have had, or what role did they play in it? I don't know. But what we do know about 9/11 is that all of the debris from the buildings were expeditiously loaded onto barges that were shipped to China. Now, why would you do that? At the time, I mean, I was so grief-stricken, I didn't really spend any mental energy thinking about the fact that they were shipping the debris to China. They were also arresting people if they collected any debris from the Twin Towers, and their rationalization was that it was disrespectful to those who died. Now it feels like one big cover-up. And we were told that the foundation of Building 7 was weakened by the falling of the Twin Towers. That's rubbish. Every structural engineer and architect in the country that has looked at it has opined that there was no weakening of the foundation of Building 7. Instead, it was a controlled demolition, just like we've seen occur all across the country when they want to take down some obsolete big, tall office building or apartment building. They just load it full of dynamite and they bring it down very intentionally to a little spot on the ground. And that's what Building 7 looks like. And then you look at Charlie Kirk. I'm not saying that the deep state did him in. I am open to suggestion, and there seems to be a lot of smoke around it that would point us in that direction. What possible motivation would they have to take out a 30-year-old genius patriot who was trying to help educate college kids? I mean, how demonic would you have to be willing to do that? But what is the motivation? I don't know.
Wow.
Do you have any insight?
Yes. After, like I say, decades of, a lifetime of history, and then really 21 years now of really looking at these deep events, we'll say. You mentioned JFK, 9/11, Building 7, Charlie Kirk. Let's go in order. Myself and many consider JFK's assassination where the deep state or the players behind the scenes stepped onto the stage. Look what we can get away with. Look what you can figure out. The official story's nonsense, and there's nothing you, the American people, can do about it. And by many, many measures, and a lot of them are in my book that you graciously mentioned at the top of the show, by many measures, that was a fatal blow to America. And I make the case that with more and more of our government and more of our tax dollars and more of our resources in the hands of these nefarious players, doing less and less for us and doing more and more for exploiting and hurting people and nations and resources all over the world, that it was the slide to the end of America, which I claim happened with the USA Patriot Act and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, John. Meaning, since those events after 9/11, we don't have our constitutional rights. Not living under the Constitution, we are literally not America. Politics is, Frank Zappa in the 1980s, the musician, said, politics is the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. And what we're kind of seeing now is the other quote that he said, they'll present the show and the pageantry of democracy for as long as it suits them. But when it's not worth it anymore, they'll take the props and the sets off the stage, they'll pull back the curtains, and we'll see the brick wall of the theater of tyranny for what it is. And by many measures, we're seeing a lot more of that now. I had the privilege of doing marketing for the publisher of my book, Chris Milligan, at trineday.com, TRINEDAY.com, who's been studying these things since the 1970s, when his father, former CIA, told him in 1969, the Vietnam War is all about drugs. There are these secret societies behind it all, and communism's all a sham. They're out to opiate your generation. To them, it's all a big game. So, John, that's the context that I remember, that I know now, and I can't forget that I've seen this in so many books and all the work that I did for Chris, being exposed to all of his other authors, all this history that challenges official history. Unfortunately, with the Kennedy assassination, Chris saw ducks put in a row for that assassination before Kennedy was even elected. Meaning, and let me be a little patient as I spell this out. Anyone who does deep research, you start to see these families in positions of power in the hugest banks and the hugest corporations of America and the hugest law firms on Wall Street swirl around the secret societies, Skull and Bones at Yale being a major example of them, but also the thread, the line, the lineage of the Freemasons. So no one of these groups pulls the trigger alone on anything. But John, you sound very well informed and interested in the JFK's assassination. Maybe you've seen this. Maybe this is news to you. Dealey Plaza is an outdoor Masonic temple with the obelisk, like Washington, D.C., with pools of water next to it, like the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., and of all the ways to kill a president, to do it in broad daylight, it really was the deep state, the powers behind the scenes, thumbing their nose at us and saying, look what we can do and you can't stop us. So why bring down Building 7? Why self-attack us in 9/11? Why take out a Charlie Kirk? Before we get to the tangible impacts on society and the culture wars and how it inflames us against each other, there is the simple trauma of it all, which is the society-wide application of what the CIA developed with its MK Ultra mind control experiments beginning in the 1950s. Many podcasters and independent researchers are justified in saying so many of these horrific events, worldwide, domestically, shooters, fires, could easily be, and one would bet, psyops that are meant to have us quivering in fear, because then we do what we're told a lot more easily and we give up. We think you can't fight City Hall. These powers are just enormous. And it would be great to save time at the end, before the show is over, John, to talk about reasons to be cheerful. You know, you said, how do we stop them? Well, look, I really want to explore that before we're done. If possible, happy to, go anywhere the conversation wants to go. But it's like John Lennon said, I'd like to know what the rulers of the world think that they're doing. I think that they're all maniacs and they're doing things for maniacal reasons. And there's a case to be made that power over others really drives people insane, and it feeds their sadistic, malicious, vicious, the worst of human potential, which children demonstrate. If they're a little too unsupervised, children can be really vicious and nasty. So we have to grow up and be adults, and we have to embrace and challenge ourselves to embrace the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Life works pretty well when everyone's got that orientation. But only people who are well nurtured and who can well nurture themselves and care about the happiness of others can walk the path of, I want to be happy and I want to help others be happy, in a nutshell.
Well, those are powerful words, and there's a lot to unpack there. I've made the statement on this show numerous times that if we as a collective world community could just agree, and we don't have to do it in Christian terms, but if we could just agree to adopt the 10 Commandments, the world would be a wonderful place to live. But it seems idealistic on the one hand, and I think it overlooks the fact that there is sheer evil in the world that is not going to be moved by the 10 Commandments or anything else in the Bible, the Quran, or whatever other religious tenet you want to pull out. They're just bad people.
And the 10 Commandments reflect and augment and amplify one of the immense values and powers of the American founding and its ideals, which is that we have rights, and rights make might. So if we could honor the 10 Commandments, even in a secular way,
that's right,
and honor the idea that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so do your children. And that guarantees that I have those rights and my children have those rights. So if we can create public policy and decide how much taxes ought to go to the roads and how much ought to go to maybe helping, poor people, then we're all oriented to the same basic thing, is that no one's got the right to. Might does not make right. Again, it goes back. That's the truth of children. I can take your lunch money just because I'm bigger than you. What kid doesn't do that because it's so primitive? It's so animalistic. It's so undeveloped. It's so, me bigger, me take it. Okay, that's where children are until one grows up to be an adult and wants to be an adult.
So where does Donald Trump play into all of this? I watched with horror in real time as someone tried to take his life in Butler, Pennsylvania, July the 13th, 2024. It ripped the scab off because I had been home from the fourth grade when Kennedy was assassinated. I watched that unfold in real time and with horror as a 10-year-old. And it brought back those vivid memories. And I was in a state of shock, disbelief, and horror as I waited for that 1 minute, maybe minute and a half before President Trump got up. And he was bleeding, but we knew that he was okay. I wonder where he figures into this. I mean, surely he knows that Thomas Matthew Crooks did not try to assassinate him. I don't even think Thomas Matthew Crooks was on the roof. But let's just say for the moment that it was. It doesn't really matter. There were people behind him that led him or whoever was on that roof to do this. And I think that Crooks was he was the Oswald of the story. He was a patsy. I think Maxwell Urich was probably the shooter. There's a lot of evidence to support that. I'll spare our listeners from having to hear it again. But it would seem to me that if I were Trump, I'd be mad as hell. And I'd be wanting to bring down the people that did it.
Yeah.
Where is he, though? It seems to me, and this is just, my instincts are pretty good, but I don't have any factual proof of this. I saw Trump on television the other day, and someone asked him about Butler, and he said, I asked my people, they said they got the guy, and that was it. Shrugged his shoulders. Next question. And now, I don't know whether he's playing poker. I hope he was. I suspect one part of me says he was playing poker. There's another side of me that says, okay, they've made a peaceful detente. We fired, we missed, you lived. You want to continue to live? Don't look.
Yeah, that's a very plausible scenario. I don't know how young people have. That's too broad of a statement. I was going to say I don't know how they have a chance because I'm old enough to remember when even the mainstream media pounced on anomalies and wouldn't let a president forget and not comment on a bullet he almost took himself. To your point, what kind of poker game is he playing? It might be exactly what you just said, which is frightening because it implies the president of the United States is not the top of the food chain.
Yes.
So he's participating in a game or a show where he's pretending to be the top of the food chain, and we're pretending to go along with him being the top of the food chain. And if he's not, who is calling the shots? What kind of control do they have over him? Donald Trump is a huge question for those who try to be fair-minded and look at what's good, bad, right, wrong, provable speculation about him and what he intends. One of the biggest alarms I have is the accusations of an economist named Catherine Austin Fitts, who has been tracking the missing money from the federal government for 30 years. And she is an eloquent explainer of how Donald Trump has now his current administration. He is surrounded by big tech powers that are making lots of moves, John, to bring in digital currency / digital programmable currency, which Ms. Fitz accuses of being the digital grid, the digital enslavement grid that many markers and indicators say that's where we're headed. You could even accuse the flood of immigrants into Europe 20 years ago, the flood into the United States over the last 10, 15 years with the open borders, as is literally happening right now in Great Britain. Well, because of, the undocumented people, this is why we need to have a digital ID implemented, next year, by the end of this year, next year, 2 years, something like that. And here are the great benefits for it. And freedom watchers for decades, like Alex Jones, has been pulling his hair out. It's all gone now for 30 years, saying the New World Order, the prison planet they're trying to erect will spin, focus, stand on that, just the digital currency. John, it maybe the 80-20 rule has to be 80%, 90% just in prayer and meditation to stay calm and summon what could be, good, even spiritually, and yet be activist in terms of having a show like yours, writing a book like mine, and telling people, I don't want to be a broken record. Question authority and resist as much as you can. And we have to be prepared to say the words President Vance any day, because men Donald Trump's age drop dead. Men his age and his physical shape, who eat what he eats, drop dead in the blink of an eye. And where did J.D. Vance come from? And that's a whole story of his sponsorship by Peter Thiel, and who Peter Thiel was, the creator first of PayPal and then Palantir, which is the CIA's one of their giant surveillance platforms. So don't we have our work cut out for us?
It certainly sounds like it. And it's kind of depressing, kind of, I don't know, demoralizing. But then you come back to what Warren Buffett said, never give up, never bet against America. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think that in my own belief system, God is in charge and he will make sure that good triumphs over evil. There may be a lot of speed bumps along the way, but at the end of the day, I am generally optimistic. I just don't really know how we were going to get there. But I'm thinking maybe the American Small Business League might be part of the solution. Tell us about it and the organization that you so well represent.
Thank you very much. We work to expose and stop big businesses from getting federal contracts that are meant for small businesses. This has been going on for decades. And if and when the SBA, which is responsible for making sure that 23% of the federal budget goes to small businesses, if they could actually prove that that happens, they can't, and I'll tell you why in a second. But if and when we can actually make Congress force exposure and compliance of the fraud of that compliance, meaning small businesses really get about 3 or 4% of the federal contracts, John, not the 23% that they're supposed to get, even though every year the SBA says, we met the goal, we exceeded the goal, how about a loan? So at ASBL.com, people can learn all about it. We have a project called Don't Cheat Women, and that's our site, don'tcheatwomen.com, to see tangible things to be done, like asking Congress and the president to raise the amount that's supposed to go to women-owned small businesses, which would increase the amount supposed to go to small businesses in general, which would pump $264 billion annually into small businesses who would create 2 or 3 million new jobs every year on top of the 2 million jobs that America typically creates. So it's a very muscular, tangible, foot in the door issue I'll put a cherry on this cake. The reason to increase the percentage of federal contracts that should go to women-owned small businesses is because they are half the population. They own 40% of all businesses in America. They sell what the government buys. But the law says that they're only supposed to get 5% of federal contracts, and in reality, they only really probably get 1%. When they get a more fair portion, they will be economically more equal to men. Right now, men earn and save more. That's why they hold 75% of most legislative and governors and cabinet positions, and they make most of the laws because they can't compete to run for office and win office because that takes money. So to get women economically equal, then they can pursue political equality, and women do have different values and priorities. And assuming we love half the human race and we love our mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters, and we value their values, and we owe a lot of our happiness to the values of women and mothers and their perspective of peacemaking, et cetera, they should be in the councils of government.
I'm good with that. There's a problem inherent in what you're saying. Our birth rate is 1.6 per married couple. That's alarming. That is not sustainable. And you need 2.1 babies for every couple in order to outpace the annual death rate that we have in this country. Elon Musk was possibly one of the first people in this country to identify that. And he is certainly trying to lead by example, but with 13 kids. But the reality is that, I just wonder how much of the women's movement has created to this diminution of the birth rate. And, if the average age is 75, it's not going to take many years before our civilization is going to be shrinking at an ever increasingly rapid rate.
Yeah.
So how do you balance those two objectives? I'm for shattering the glass ceiling, 100%. Why wouldn't you be? But I'm also in favor of maintaining the family unit. And my son, he has very liberal paternity leave from his job. I think he gets 6 weeks a year. And they just had their second child, who happens to be a boy. Thank you very much. We need to keep that Gordon name alive and well. But he's playing Mr. Mom a lot of the time. What happens when the paternity time is over? And who's going to raise that child? And is that not more suited to the mother than the father? Oh, boy, my email is going to light up now. GordonTruth@gmail.com. Have at it.
Yeah, you back to the theme of how much of things are a psyop. There's a lot laid at the feet of the CIA and others creating the kind of feminism over the last 70 years that distorted, that really brainwashed generations of women into thinking I need to compete as a man in the male arenas, and it is to the destruction of the birth rate. And if you really want to look at that, one must look at the devastating harm of the COVID shots and look at the work of Naomi Wolf and her dailyclout.io, because fertility is collapsing in all the countries that took the COVID shot, John, and the human race is under assault. Talk about deep state or conspiracies. There's a great case to be made, and many people persuaded, as I am, that there is a sickening and depopulation agenda. And it's coincident with the rise of all the tech and all the AI and all the robotics and all the gene editing that the psychopaths at the very, very top, the richest of the rich, are envisioning a planet with many fewer human beings. That's why it's so urgent to tell ourselves, I'm an adult who can handle the truth, question authority, brace yourself, and then dig deep and find What inside you and other life-loving friends is strong enough for this moment, who can know enough history to see civilizations rise and fall and say, it's not personal. This is just what we do as humans. And I'm going to fight the good fight with as much love and happiness as I possibly can.
Good words to end on. Thank you very much, Bruce de Torres, for coming on. He is the author of God's School 9/11 and JFK, The Lies That Are Killing Us. Great conversation. Thank you for coming on. How's the book doing? I'm thinking we can get it on Amazon because I have the order form right here.
You sure can. And folks can read all about it at brucedetorres.com. The homepage is a list of great reviews that I've been privileged to receive.
Well, thank you, Bruce. You're doing good work. Thank you for what you're doing. Please continue to do so and come back anytime.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Like many of our listeners, I lived through the Vietnam War. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll was the mantra on the streets in the United States, while many of our brothers were fighting an endless, seemingly endless war in Vietnam. And without a real motive or logical conclusion in mind, it appeared. Well, our guest, James Bradley, is an author. He's written 5 works, including Flags of Our Fathers. In order to write the book, he actually lived in Vietnam for 10 years. I call that commitment. Thank you, James, for coming on the show with us, and welcome.
Good to be here, John.
So tell me, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I wrote Flags of Our Fathers about my dad on Iwo Jima. Clint Eastwood and Steven Spielberg did the movie Flags of Our Fathers. And then my second book was about Flyboys, about George Bush was going to get his head cut off. And I went back to the island and found the Japanese that were going to do it. And then I wondered, how did we get out into the Pacific? So I wrote a book about Teddy Roosevelt, another book about Franklin Roosevelt called The China Mirage. And then Vietnam, just like you, I was a kid. I was 13 years old in 1967 when my brother volunteered for the Marines. So, you know, I watched Walter Cronkite and Mike Wallace and every single thing that, you know, that was on TV about Vietnam. And then Vietnam was, you know, it was in the movies. There's Platoon, there's this movie, that movie, and it was in the background. But I just thought, you know, I've done the Pacific, but I don't know about Vietnam. So I ventured to Vietnam, and I thought, I wrote 4 books. You know, I think this will take me 3 years to write a book about Vietnam. But because of all the gobbledygook that I had been fed by American propaganda, John, it took me 10 years. The reality in Vietnam is, like, you can take everything you've learned in the last documentary you watched about Vietnam, the books you read about Vietnam, and just flip it opposite. And that's what happened.
So the Vietnam book is titled Precious Freedom, but you categorize it as a novel. So is it fiction or is it a little bit of both?
It's history as fiction. What happened was I had disparate, you know, if you write about Iwo Jima, everybody's on the island. It's one geographical story. And I had years of interviews all over the place. So to smash everybody together, I had to, you know, make it a novel. So yes, maybe the grass was a little, you know, worn on over here, or there's a name that, you know, but it's basically history is fiction. Everything is based on interviews with American Marines and with Vietnamese. I interviewed Vietnamese who worked for Ho Chi Minh. I interviewed Vietnamese who killed Americans when they were 15. You know, I went out to the fields and the rivers and the mountains and had the Vietnamese vets take me out and recreate the battles. So that's why it took me 10 years.
So what part of Vietnam did you live in?
I lived all over the place, but the Marines were, if you look at them, you know, Vietnam is long. And if you look at Vietnam, kind of in the middle is Da Nang. That's where the French invaded in 1858, and that's where the Americans invaded in 1965, the Marines. And so north of there is a town called Dong Ha. That was the Marine base that I focused on. And to my shock, you know, if you look at the publicity on this book, Oliver Stone, who is a Vietnam veteran, says, if we knew what James Bradley reveals, if we knew this back in the 60s, American mothers would not have let their children go to Iraq and Afghanistan. What he's talking about is that civilians pushed the Marines out of this area of Vietnam. I'll repeat. It wasn't armor. It wasn't the North Vietnamese army. It wasn't trained soldiers. It was sandal-clad civilians, many of them chicks, girls, who pushed the Marines out. So when the Marines came to Vietnam, it was filmed in the middle of the day. And when they left, it was in the middle of the night. And it's really hard to even find out how they left because they ran away. They were beaten by civilians. That's the shocking part of this book, and the female aspect. You know, it took me about 6 months of drinking tea to get my first interviews. You know, guys who looked like me, we killed about 3 million Vietnamese. So, you know, and they didn't know what I was going to write, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to write because haven't done the research yet. But nobody had ever. The shocking thing, John, is I'm the only American author who has gone to Vietnam and asked, how did you win? And I didn't think this was a difficult question because I caddied for Vince Lombardi when I was a kid in Wisconsin. Bart Starr's cottage was 3 doors down. I played in the Green Bay Packers houses as I was a little boy. You know what I mean? And it was a win or lose. If you lost under Vince, you looked at the film. How did that happen? What was their plan? Why did we lose? And that we have not done to this day with Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam and just, you know, I'm like, just what would Vince Lombardi ask? He would say, how did you win? So I found out the answers, and I am shocked to this day that I'm the only guy who has documented how they won. The narrative in America is we could have won if only. If only the politician, no. If only the LBJ, it was Nixon, no. It was, we should have just gone up like Patton and invaded. And if only Westmoreland had, you know, the narrative in America among the vets is we could have won. And what my book, I want to put these American vets at peace. They didn't have a chance. The Vietnamese had a plan based on thousands of years of history. We portray them as just lucky in the swamps and ambush. No. They had a plan. Ho Chi Minh spent 30 years in the West studying Western media. I'll repeat. Ho Chi Minh, the first thing Sun Tzu says in The Art of War is know your enemy. Ho Chi Minh went to Boston, New York, Paris, London to study the media. And he came back after 30 years and he said he chose he chose General Giap. His name is G-I-A-P. It's pronounced Giap. General Giap, you know, Trump recently talked about our great generals, MacArthur and Eisenhower. And well, he's got to go back to guys trained in the 1910s and 1920s. General Giap is the winningest general of the 20th century, and we don't study him. They had a plan. It wasn't luck. General Giap beat the French, Japanese, the Americans. He beat the Chinese. Vietnam's the only country in the world that's defeated 3 of the 7 UN security members. John, Vietnam, if you count reserves, has the largest army in the world today.
What was the world obsessed over when it came to Vietnam? I mean, it's not a hugely wealthy country. I don't know what the natural resources are. Is it militarily in a strategic location that people just had to have it. I mean, I never understood the war in Vietnam. I don't think most Americans understood the war in Vietnam. And you are actually offering a new explanation that I have never heard before, but don't challenge you on it. I was always told that we didn't win the war in Vietnam because we didn't try hard enough, that we didn't have the will to win, and that if we did try and win the war, it would bring us into direct combat with the Russians, and that could erupt into a world war. That was always my impression, but you're telling us something very different from that.
Yeah, the narrative you just said is the Dallas Cowboys could have beat the Packers in the Ice Bowl. They just didn't try hard enough, and their fingers were cold. And no, they lost. The Dallas Cowboys lost.
What was the mission? What was the goal? We were told that it was to stem the spread of communism. I assume that you challenged that as well.
No, I don't challenge what the American government said. I mean, that's what they said. I didn't say I challenge anything they said.
No, I said I assume you would challenge that, but go ahead.
No. That's what Johnson, here, I'll tell you about our great press. Johnson in 1967 is up against the wall, and the press says, Mr. President, in a press conference, why are we in Vietnam? And listen to what the press accepted from Lyndon Johnson. This is the President of the United States. I think if you saw a little child in this room who was trying to waddle across the floor and some big bully came along and grabbed it by the hair and started stomping on it, I think you would do something about that. So that's what that's what the President of the United States explained why we're in Vietnam. He didn't know. If you look at what Johnson said for 4 years, it was, we had to go in because we were attacked. We had to go in because if we don't stop them now, they're going to be in Hawaii and in California. And then it went to, if we don't fight in Vietnam, we're going to have nuclear war. I'm fighting to prevent nuclear war. And then, if a kid waddles in, what? Johnson was all over the place, but he didn't want to get shot in the head like JFK, who said no to Vietnam.
Yeah, well, guess who shot JFK in the head?
I don't have to guess. But Eisenhower takes 3 years to put his last speech together. And he says, you better watch out. The military-industrial complex is growing too fast, and it's brand new, and it can steal your republic. Then a little kid named JFK becomes president. And Curtis LeMay and Allen Dulles and a lot of people hate this guy. JFK is seen as a saint now. He is to me, but he was hated by LBJ, who was going to go to jail if JFK didn't die. Blah, blah,
exactly.
Blah. But listen to what LBJ said to the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Christmas party after JFK was assassinated. So come back to me, 1963, eggnog in the White House, and Johnson goes up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and says, okay, boys, you give me my election, and I'll give you your war. Mm-hmm. So Johnson didn't want to get shot in the head. So that's why we're in Vietnam. And now this is not James Bradley talking. I want to couch this, that in the 60s, there was a guy by the name of David Shoup. Who was David Shoup? He was the U.S. Commandant of the Marine Corps. David Shoup was awarded the Medal of Honor for heroism at Tarawa. Read my book about Iwo Jima. Tarawa was unbelievable. David Shoup got a Medal of Honor. He's one of the smartest Marines ever. And David Shoup resigned when LBJ went into Vietnam. He took off his uniform, put on a suit and tie, and went all across the country. You'll see in this book, Precious Freedom, David Shoup, a U.S. Marine, is saying, we cannot win in Vietnam. It's not worth the death of one American boy. Ho Chi Minh is the George Washington. Can I make this point right here with a visual, if you don't mind, John?
Sure.
This is the American view of the war. And tell me when you can see this. Can you see that?
Yeah, generally.
Okay, but
For our
that's
radio listeners, it's an American flag tethered to a map, I believe.
well. If I could
of-
explain it,
Yeah, please.
the point is, it's two countries. There's a North Vietnam and a South Vietnam separated by the DMZ. So that's what I and my brother, that's what Walter Cronkite told us. There's two countries, and North Vietnam is a bad guy. They invaded South Vietnam, and we're fighting for democracy in South Vietnam. That's total baloney. There was one country, and we invaded one country. I went to Vietnam, and they were like, Mr. Bradley, the New York Times had big imaginations. They said there were two countries here. Mr. Bradley, I never thought I needed a visa to visit my uncle in what you called North Vietnam. John, I went back to my hotel, and it took like a day of thinking. Every single documentary, watch Ken Burns, he starts out, well, there was a North Vietnam and a South Vietnam, and we went to defend South. No, there wasn't. That was a CIA Allen Dulles creation. It was called Indochina. The Vietnamese said to me, Mr. Bradley, I was Vietnamese. I was born Vietnamese. But when the French drew the maps, they said I was something called an Indo-Chinese. And then we beat the French, so the Americans came in, and they called me a South Vietnamese, and they called my uncle a North Vietnamese. So we were just doing all this gobbledygook. In Vietnam, every single speech that the Prime Minister or Ho Chi Minh gave was, there's only one Vietnam. So we hired a bunch of traitors to run South Vietnam. The guys who ran South Vietnam, the President Tu and Vice President Key, if your watchers and listeners remember these names, those guys were traitors to the cause. They fought for the French. So it's like, I don't want to make an analogy to the Civil War in America because it wasn't a civil war. They were paid assassins for the French. And then we came and put them in a suit and said, you guys are Democrats, right? And we're fighting for democracy. We got a police force. We're beating everybody up. We got torture cells, tiger cages, and it's all paid by America. Yeah, we are very democratic. It was just our veterans got lied to. What they went to fight for never existed.
So zoom out 30,000 feet in retrospect. What do you make of all that?
I need to take the mind of everybody and talk about the world island. What's the world island? Well, South America and North America. No, that's not okay, Australia, no. The world island is this huge landmass that goes from China to Israel, from Russia down to Vietnam. It includes India, Iran, Russia, China, all the stands. That's one piece of real estate. It's called the World Island. And in 1905, a British guy named Mackinder, you can look this up, said, he who controls the World Island controls the world. The World Island has the most people, has the most resources. So that's why America is chewing on that World Island. See, we look, we're in Vietnam. Oh, no. Oh, we're way over there in Ukraine. Those are different. Oh, Afghanistan, they wear sandals. No, it's all the same world island that we're trying to cause chaos. Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, Vietnam, hit Taiwan, China. We can't let the world island get together because then America will be number two. My argument from having lived in these countries is America could double its GNP and be number two or number three. We could be a rich country with, high-speed rail knitting us together and safe streets. No girl in a miniskirt is concerned about walking around Ho Chi Minh City at 12 midnight. No. Shanghai, it's like all knitted together. And, no country is perfect. No people are perfect. But my daughter lives in Taipei. You should see the quality of life that my friends who live in Asia have. the quality of life I had in Vietnam. The stabbings in the West, in Britain, they're stabbing in London and New York, and then the shootings in America. How come you don't hear about that in Vietnam?
So am I understanding you correctly that you think that it's your belief that Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan are all part of one continuing effort to try and co-op or keep at bay the great island, the world island?
Oh yeah, no, it's a definite strategy of the British and American militaries, and it's been for over 100 years. And Russia has the most resources in the world.
It doesn't appear as if we've made a lot of progress.
You've got to break Russia up. If you want to continue the American empire with 1,000 bases around the world, Russia has the most resources in the world. China has all the manufacturing. You're talking 3 billion people between India and China. If they knit that all together with the Silk Road and fiber optics and trains, they've got trains running from Shanghai to Germany now. You can't let that happen if you're if you're an American military person. You got to interrupt that. I say, let it happen and get involved. Let's make money, let's get rich.
You've got a great insight, and you've certainly challenged a lot of the conventional wisdom and certainly the narratives that we've heard for 60 years. James Bradley, you're an interesting guy. You visited 22 countries before you were, or by the time you were the age of 22. That's more than I can boast of at the age of 72. How did you do that? And what motivated you?
When I was 13, I read an article by James Michener, who was the biggest selling author at that time. James Michener, Tales of the South Pacific and Sayonara with Marlon Brando. And he wrote an article. He said, he was talking to young kids, and he said, when you're 22, you're going to graduate from college, and they're going to ask you, what do you want to do with your life? He said, it's a great question. Answer it when you're 35. He said, from 22 to 35, grow, do, explore, make mistakes. And then in the article, he showed that if he hadn't been broke in Spain and Afghanistan, he couldn't have written this book and that book. So at 13, I hitchhiked from Antigo, Wisconsin to Bass Lake. That was 18 miles. And I thought that I was an astronaut, had gone to the moon. I was 13 and I got up to our cottage at Bass Lake without my mom and dad driving. And then I just started buying maps, and I went to Miami, and I hitchhiked across the United States a few times. And then I went to the University of Notre Dame. I was president of my class, and a guy said, hey, you should go to school in Tokyo. Well, Tokyo? I didn't know where Tokyo was. Is that Beijing or, Shanghai? So I said, okay, I signed up, and then I found myself in Japan. And then when I was in Japan, I looked, they've got roads in Asia. So I hit the hippie trail, and a Japanese girl ran away from home from me. I put a ladder up to her second-story bedroom. She came down at 3 a.m., and we took off for 9 months. I met the Shah of Iran's wife, Empress Farah, had some adventures. But yeah, I did 22 countries by the time I was 22, and that was all on my dime. I sold pot. I was the #1 pots and pans salesman in the country, and I took that money and went around the world.
That's an amazing story. And while you were on that venture around the world, you were jailed in Berlin, as I understand it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I don't know how old everybody is, but there used to be a West Germany and a East Germany, and the West Berlin and East Berlin, and everybody was nervous about spies. And I was at a luncheonette, and there was a clipped American soldier-looking guy next to me, and I just said, hey, where are you stationed? Well, he told me, and it didn't make sense because I knew that area because I had been selling pots and pans there. And I asked him 3 times to explain, where are you based? And then I didn't pay attention to him. I thought there's something wrong with his head. And then I didn't notice, but he went to the telephone and he did what he was trained. If anybody asks you too many questions, just call the MPs. So I saw the MPs pull up and I thought, I wonder what they're doing. And then I went back to my newspaper.
Who's MPs?
The American, West Berlin was not ruled by the Germans. It was ruled by the English, French, and US military. It was not civilian. So West Berlin was a military occupation. It was like you're on a base. So I'm in a
circa what?
Circa 1975.
I'll be darned.
So I see the MPs and I think, oh, I wonder what they're doing. And then about 2 minutes later, they shoved my head down into my breakfast and handcuffed me. And I spent 3 days in solitary confinement in an underground jail cell. You know, it sounds dramatic, but it was 75. There was no internet. They had to cable back to the US, who is this guy? And then I had a fold out passport. They were like, why were you in Afghanistan? What were you doing in Pakistan, Mr. Bradley? Mr. Bradley, you were in Iran for 5 months. What were you doing you know what I mean? I was on the trail where opium dealers were also. I hadn't done anything and they let me go, but you know, they had to hold me just to check me out. That was a lot of fun, solitary confinement.
So they jailed you under what premise? That you were a spy?
No, they jailed me because they had to, because a guy asked me questions. It was a military city. There's no logic to it. You're not talking about justice. A guy said, I'm suspicious, and they threw me in jail. It didn't cost them anything. When they let me out, I said, are you going to apologize and explain this? And they said, do you want to go back in your cell?
Jiminy Christmas.
It was a military, this is not as big a deal as it sounds. It was a military situation. And they had to, I wrote a lot about George Bush. I slept in 2 of George Bush's homes, the old man, 41. You know what? They checked me out. I'm sure they downloaded my computer. There was a white van out in front of my house before I met Bush. And you think, well, they're spying on. No. Let's say I got some poison into Barbara Bush's nose and she died. The New York Stock Exchange would fall down. You know what I mean? Who let this guy in? So, there's something called security. George Bush up at Maine, he had anti-aircraft missiles outside his window. It's not safe to be a president who runs a war.
No doubt.
But he was a great guy with the old man 41 was a very smart guy. Didn't talk much. He listened a lot.
Former head of the CIA.
A lot of secrets there.
Pictures of someone looking very much like him in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963.
So why did George Bush cooperate with me, an author? I went to him and I said, President Bush, I know where you were shot down in 1944 when you were 21. I've been to the island. Nobody else has. And I know the guys who are going to chop your head off. And they chopped off the heads of 8 aviators and they barbecued their livers. So I had known all this stuff. And Bush said, I can't talk to you. My son is president. I can't talk to the New York Times, Reader's Digest. I just have to say no to everybody. So I thought about it. And the next day I said, Mr. President, my book, Flyboys, ends when you're 21 in 1945. So you're not president. I promise I won't ask you any questions beyond 1945. And Bush looks out the window and he says, does this mean we don't have to talk about Iraq? And I said, yes, sir. I said, I promise. So George Bush let me hang around with him. I took him back to Japan to where he was shot down. We put him in a little rubber boat. Time magazine covered it. A CNN, Paul Azan, did a 1-hour documentary. This was all based on secrets that the head of the CIA, George Bush, the former president, didn't know the stuff I was telling him. So I brought him back to his youth.
Now, what a wonderful experience, and what an incredible life you have lived, and you continue to live an extraordinary existence, as I understand, on the island of Mauritius.
Mauritius, yeah.
Mauritius. Why did you choose the island of Mauritius in the middle of the Indian Ocean?
I mean, 10 years in Vietnam, like it wasn't lollygagging around. It was pretty intense. And I was talking to people, everybody I can't say it that way. I would estimate that many of the people I interviewed are the survivors of like 30 Dead. You know, I interviewed the woman, the opening scene in the book. You see this guy Chip shoots a man. Well, the man is the father of May. May is 15 years old. So May is a little farm girl, and she immediately, oh man, the Americans are enemies. They wear those types of uniforms. They have helmets. I'm going to kill every American I ever see. She hikes to the forest, and there's people trained by Ho Chi Minh's brilliant People's War strategy. And they turn May into a sniper. And May comes out of the forest, and with patience, she gets 5 medals for killing 5 Marines. This is a 15-year-old girl. This is what's shocking about this book, Precious Freedom, is that girls helped push the Marines out of northern part of Vietnam. But, so this is very intense. I have the book, like a first draft of the book, and I need to just get away from Vietnam to get perspective. And I'm an island guy. So I've done 5 books on the Pacific. The U.S. military calls it the Indo-Pacific. So I thought I'd come to the beaches here in Mauritius. So right now I'm next to Diego Garcia. I kid that when I'm sleeping, I can hear B-52s over my head going to Diego Garcia. We're putting armaments out here to bomb Iran. We just put military hardware into Nepal and Bangladesh for the first time. The American press is not reporting. St. Martin's Island is like right over here. It's right off the coast of Bangladesh. And the American military wanted it. The prime minister of Bangladesh said no. So guess what? There were riots in the street, a coup. We kicked the prime minister out, and we installed a friend of Bill Clinton. And the U.S. military took St. Martin's Island. So we are militarizing the Indo-Pacific. I mean, we're militarizing the Pacific like you can't imagine. But the Indian Ocean part of it, hey, I see billions of dollars of American money flowing out here. So I came here to clear my head about Vietnam, finish Precious Freedom, and then it's a great place to be. I don't know what else to say. I'm a beach guy.
You've led such an extraordinary life, and you've met so many incredible people, and you've visited some of the most remote places on Earth. Have you ever worked in conjunction with our United States government, or any government for that matter? I mean, inquiring minds just want to know. My journalistic inquisitiveness forces me to ask the question.
No, I mean, I sold pots and pans door to door. I went to University of Notre Dame. I was president of my freshman class. This is documented. A guy said, "Why don't you go to Tokyo?" I signed up for it. I was the #1 pots and pans summer. What'd they call me? Summer salesman, pots and pans, waterless cookware. And I put the money in my pocket, went to Japan, and then I hitchhiked around the world. That it sounds like a big deal, but we were staying in like hotels that would cost 25 cents a night. I went around the world on $2,000. $2,000 was a lot of money in 1974, 75. So this isn't like I had some big support and I was staying in first class hotels, So anyway, I went around the world. I sold pots and pans in Germany and Italy so I could go back to the United States, get my degree. I went to New York. I was in the entertainment business. I worked with Bob Hope, Ella Fitzgerald, Tony Bennett, doing entertainment for big corporations. And then I went to London to run a company. I had an office in Tokyo. So I was traveling that way. I was a businessman. And then I wasn't getting satisfaction. And I perceived that I wasn't really a businessman, like my father. So I sold out and I went up to Mount Everest Base Camp. And I said, I'm not coming down till I figure out what to do. And if you're
it's cold up there.
Well, I'm from northern Wisconsin, but I mean, it's cold in northern Wisconsin. And
yeah,
it's
for
cold.
sure. You got cabins in northern Wisconsin.
The big thing about Mount Everest is that you can't breathe. So to put on a boot, you're to have this conversation would take a long, but anyway, I'm up there and I find a book by Dick Francis. Now, what does that mean? Find a book. There's no books up at Mount Everest. It's all grit and cooking and, you're up there trying to survive. So I find this greasy shelf and I have a headlamp, and there's a book smashed in the soot next to this a wall where there's a fire and blah, blah, blah. And I pry this book out, the cover rips off, and it's a book by Queen Elizabeth's favorite author, Dick Francis. And he said, I was a jockey. I never imagined writing a book. And I got hurt. And now I write books, and you can too. So I thought, I want to be creative, but I'm not a businessman. Maybe I should be an author. And the thing is, if I had been in New York and said to my friends, I want to be an author, they would have, ridiculed me, and I probably wouldn't be an author today. But I was up in the middle of nowhere where nobody could, I couldn't talk to anybody other than the sun and the moon. And I just imagine myself as an author enough that, now I've written 5 books, but Flags of Our Fathers, was turned down 27 times. So everybody says, oh, Mr. Bradley, I understand how Flags of Our Fathers became a New York Times #1 bestseller. And I'm like, I wish you were around when I was pitching it. I pitched that book for over 2 years. I have 27 letters from 27 publishers telling me that Flags of Our Fathers was a dud.
Well, you certainly proved them wrong, and so did the American people that bought the book, or I guess people around the globe who bought the book. Where do we find it, and how is your latest book, Precious Freedom, doing?
Well, Precious Freedom will be published November 11th. But if you go to Amazon.com and pre-order it, it helps the media. Guys like John Gordon will start to pay attention if they see pre-sales. And so it's doing, a lot of people are emailing me that they've purchased the book, but nobody can read it. I don't have a copy. I have not physically held the book. It's just coming off the production line. But November 11th, it'll be shipped out. And I'm not trying to, pump a book, but I think it's going to sell because I'm the first author who ever went to Vietnam and said, how did you guys win? And then I did something amazing. I wrote down what they said. That's never been done.
You started your career selling pots and pans, and so you've got that in your DNA as one salesman to another. You're not bothering me by pumping the book. I think I'm going to put it on my wish list and go to Amazon right now and get an advanced, I'll pre-order the book. But thank you so much, James, for coming on today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I've learned a lot, actually, and I'm grateful to you for that.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. And come on out to Mauritius. We'll take a walk on the beach.
I just got back from Europe, and I'm still trying to recover from the jet lag. Mauritius is how many hours? 43?
It depends on connections, but you're into 37 to 42 hours. The
Holy
Indian
cow.
Ocean is enormous. You've got to fly, Europe, you can get there in 8 to 10 hours. you're talking like 30 to 40 hours to get out here. You've got to go to Europe and then go, the Indian Ocean is a lot of water.
And imagine that. And we've got a better internet connection than a lot of our other guests who are just around the corner. James, thank you again. And best wishes to you. How do we follow you? How do we keep up with you?
JamesBradley.com. And anybody can send me an email there. I'll be happy to answer. You can see my bio, my 5 books, JamesBradley.com.
Thank you so much, James Bradley. Best wishes to you, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you, John.